Hello and welcome to another edition of Freight Club, a WTA Group podcast. Today we're taking lessons from Addfield, a British SME who are world-leading manufacturers of incinerators. Addfield began their exporting journey in 2012 and they now export to a staggering 140 countries worldwide, making Managing Director Derek Carr ideally placed to give advice for businesses exporting for the first time and established exporters looking to expand their portfolio. And Derek joins me on the podcast today. Brilliant. So thanks very much for joining me on the podcast today, Derek. So if you could just start then by just explaining Addfield and your products and what your role at the company is.
Yeah, of course. So the business is called Addfield Environmental Systems Limited, and I'm the managing director of AES and Addfield Projects Limited. So we're based in Staffordshire and we design, manufacture and export our goods to 145 countries around the world.
Yeah, so it's like incinerators and things is the...
Yeah, that's it. So going back to the very beginnings, it was very much a British manufacturer for British farmers. When they would have fallen stock on site, there's the risk of vermin, spread of diseases, so they would manage the waste on site. It started for British farmers. It got to probably the last recession where we realised that really we're putting all of our eggs into one basket, which generates risk. So we started working more with, it used to be called the UKTI, and then it's the Department of International Trade, and now it's Department for Business and Trade, so it's changed its names a few times. But really to actually have an export plan to say, okay, who is Addfield, what's our USP, which markets may be interested in it, and get us focused then to not all have all our eggs in one basket. So the journey into the exporting world really started in 2012.
Yeah, so talk me through that then. So you started looking at exports in 2012. How's it moved since then?
I think at the very beginning, we was very much, as I said, British manufacturers, British farmers. Our telephone numbers on the website was just 01543. It was very much thinking like a small business, and it wasn't internationalised, so it was all a .co.uk. It was really looking at the businesses as a whole. We went through a big branding re-exercise, so even though the company name hasn't changed, on every van or marketing material that you'll see, it will just say Addfield, incinerate, cremate. So it says exactly what we are. Get away with all the fluffy stuff. That's what we do. We build incinerators and cremators. And then look to internationalise the business. So changing to a .com, changing to a +44, making sure that people felt like it was a bigger company than, even if at the beginning there was, I remember when I joined the business in 2010, there was 3 of us in a 2,500 square foot factory. So we knew where we wanted to be, and we knew that we wanted to give the market the best products on the market. I'd love to say when we did our export strategy that we went to the neighbouring countries like Europe, where obviously before Brexit there was trade agreements in place which made business a lot easier. But actually our first large one, which turned a bit of a corner for us, which allowed us to reinvest, was everything that was happening in Libya with Gaddafi and aid agencies and being able to support hospitals with their medical waste. That was our first large export one. And it was a bit of a journey because we had, it was a £250,000 contract on one contract then. And at that time, our turnover was only around 600,000. So it was a big project for us, which with a small team, we had to project manage it and bring in other contractors to help us to build it. This was equated to, off the top of my head, it was about 6 40-foot containers worth of goods. So it was actually understanding who we're going to use, how we're going to get it there, how it's going to get it being insured, what Incoterms it was going to use. So it was a whole new journey for Addfield. Yeah, so it was a bit of a roller coaster at the beginning. I know that there was a few lessons learned that I looked at, like letter of credits. I'd never worked with a letter of credit before, and feeling like you had to educate yourself. It felt like there was no one really there to speak to. But once the turnover increased, and once we started to do more of a lessons learned and then put systems in place, SOPs in place, policies in place, we felt then we could find where our weaknesses are and look to recruit the right people to fill those gaps.
Yeah, Addfield are a great example, really, to talk to about exporting, because in the recent history, you've kind of gone from that introductory stage that you've spoken about there to becoming sort of an established, a very well-established exporter that's, distributing to 140 countries. So I suppose the message here, the lesson for business leaders could be that opportunities in exporting can lie in perhaps the most least expected areas.
No, you're totally right. Yeah, I think you have to be opportunistic and look at what's happening around the world and saying, look, okay, where can you bring added value? We did a project for UNICEF, which was in Togo, and the commissioned engineers, imagine they're very used to Europe at this time. So put bins outside, it was taken away. You go to the hospital, your bandages are taken away, they're put in separate bins, everything's coded. Where they went to this facility that was in Togo, where they had all the medical waste that was near the hospital in an open pit. Animals were living off the land, so where all this medical waste was. The people were living off the animals, so they were using the milk from the goats, where the goats were eating from this land. And that whole circular economy was just wrong. It didn't mean that they were wrong, it was just that whole education of like how you manage waste is different. So it allowed us then to look at it and say, okay, what do we want to do? Do we just want to sell us an incinerator, or do we want to sell the idea of a solution? So it then came into saying, okay, we don't want to just manufacture them, put them on a boat and allow the customer to buy a plug and play. But it was really there to go in there and say, okay, this is why you're having this product, to stop this from happening. This is your risk. This is how we're turning that risk into a solution, and we'll stop this reoccurring. So I think this is the one part of like, I feel that Addfield's quite special. I go to many events and a lot of people are involved in export, but say if it's, I'm going to say food and beverages, but that we can talk about any market, and say that there's so many great stories about whiskey at the moment, which is great, and it's really helping the British economy. But you normally find you won't sell it to the end user, you'll sell it to, say, the supermarkets, within the beer community or the pubs or wherever you're going to sell it to. Where with the incinerators, it feels like you're getting straight to the root problem and understanding like, where are these machines really bringing value. And I think this is where it brings us being quite grounded as a business. Instead of like just selling the machines and patting ourselves on the back, it's actually feeding it back to the guys who are doing all the fabrication, doing all the factory, and actually appreciating you're actually building these machines that are making real life differences in country, and people are reaping those rewards with managing waste correctly.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting what you said about when you sort of said you kind of not just selling the incinerator, you're selling a solution. And I think the lesson here is absolutely around really focusing in on what the issues are for the end buyer, and to have success exporting, finding a solution that fits that pain point or that problem that they're having. I just wanted to ask you though about, because you've said about how basically in 2012 was when the exporting began, and now you're exporting to over 140 countries, which is a phenomenal scaling by any standard. How has that been achieved in such a short space of time, to have such a widespread export portfolio in such a short time?
No, great question. Sometimes I go to these events and I sit back and to think of like that journey, how fast it was. The right thing to take on board from this podcast is, one, having the right type of support and the right people around you. So they always say the difference between a manager and a leader. I see myself more as being a leader instead of somebody who's micromanaging. So a lot of the guys that have been with us since the very beginning are still with us today. They've moved up the ranks, and you feel that all of those lessons learned are being stored within the business. Keeping an open relationship with the Department of International Trade, or DBT, so you do get to bounce ideas. I'm not going to say that they have all the answers, because they will just generically know about international trade, but probably not about incinerators. So don't think they've got a magic on them or do everything for you. You have to do that journey yourself as well. But also not being scared of it. I think one thing to take is you will make mistakes. I'm not going to sit here and say, as I said about the DBT, there isn't a magic wand, and you've just got to make yourself a plan, maybe go for the lower dangling fruits at the beginning. So if it's the fact that you want to only work in GBP and the euro, go for the countries that are going to be able to trade in those markets. If you're scared of looking at international trade and you're thinking of Incoterms, instead of you worrying about it, speak to competent logistic companies, pick 2 or 3 that best suits your business and only offer them. Don't go and try and be everything to everyone. Don't make it so much of a scary burden. Just make little bite size each day, and I think you'll enjoy it. I have. It's been a great experience, and a lot of our distributors now are what I would regard as friends. So
yeah, absolutely. There's some great, really good stuff there, and lessons for certainly people that are kind of starting their export journey, which, you know, there's so many SMEs are. I was hoping, though, if we could move the conversation for sort of the second half to talk more about the challenges that you now have as kind of an established exporter.
Probably the biggest issue that we've got at the moment, and I feel that whenever you go to these seminars, is having the right people to fill the positions for the jobs. That's probably the biggest problem that we have. There's lots of job applications out there, but people don't want them. And that really concerns me. Definitely with Brexit, now we had a lot of the European community that would fill these jobs, whether it was for British farmers or it was drivers. There's so many jobs that I'd love to be able to offer to people, but everyone just wants a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. It's as if weekends is a no-go for people now. So we've looked to get sponsorship from the UK government, which we pay for, to bring people over from the likes of Nigeria, Bangladesh, Pakistan, to actually have these guys working in our factory for, say, a period of 2-3 years. I'd love to see that the British government doing more to support businesses. If we can't fill those positions, they should allow us then to make it easier to bring people into the country to fill those positions. If you was going to say my biggest headache at the moment is recruitment, and then the larger projects, the guys at UK Export Finance are brilliant. However, to get some of the more problematic jobs, which the idea of UK Export Finance is that we don't want to lose any jobs, any orders that should be coming into the United Kingdom. But there's so much of a due diligence process, and there's certain countries, say the likes of Egypt, which have got their currency locked at the moment, that makes it difficult to get certain projects over the line. So, yeah, really trying to see how we can put some energy into those more difficult countries and look at the recruitment. Brexit, I feel like we've gone past that now. There's obviously a new trade agreement that's been put in place for Australia and New Zealand. We've just installed a large incinerator for a mining facility in Papua New Guinea, but that was sold through our Australian distributor. So having these trade agreements really energises him to say, I've got some great case studies, I can do more with this, because they've installed it, they've commissioned it, the customer loves it, the case study is back. These trade agreements really help for him to sell more. Yeah.
What's your advice for finding new distributors then in a particular region? Because that sounds like a key ingredient on your supply chain, getting to the end buyer. What sort of things do you look for when you're trying to find new distributors in new parts of the world that you're perhaps exporting to for the first time?
I think the communication is the big one. So straight away, there's no point going to somebody and then saying, I've got a great product, and giving them a leaflet or a flyer and saying, look at this great product. You've got to believe it as well. So if people start doing their due diligence on you and saying they're going to look at your website, look at your social media pages, what type of culture are you building within the business, and then actually get on a plane and go to some of these exhibitions. So if you believe in your product that much, speak to the DBT, or there's other groups where you can get grant funding for. See if you can get any support with the grants. As I said, jump on a plane, have a look at the exhibitor list, because it will already be on their portals. See if there's any synergy in any of those companies that you work with, and if there's a gap in their portfolio of goods, arrange a meeting with them and getting in front of some of these. Still the best way of doing business. Yeah. I know COVID made it difficult, but I feel that now there's a window of opportunity that people want to travel. People want to shake hands, see the whites of people's eyes. So have a look at the best exhibitions that best suit you. Jump on a plane, even if it's the first one, even if you don't take a stand. And then after that, once you've got the confidence, going and networking. That's the key thing. If you're not used to networking, go to networking events now. Every opportunity. Go on your own, because I feel if you do it as part of a team, it's great to bounce off each other, but you find that somebody else takes control of the meeting. If you go to networking events on your own, it's more or less like speed dating. You more or less have to sell yourself. So getting that elevator pitch right, building your confidence up. So if you can meet the customer's needs, and then you've got a great product, bloody stop wasting time, get on that plane and scream about it and show that passion.
You mentioned slightly earlier in that answer about the free trade deal with Australia. You know, we've also, well, the UK has signed one with the CPTPP, which is a group of countries in the Indo-Pacific region. You know, there's quite a lot of free trade agreements bubbling away. They're in negotiations with India. What's sort of Addfield's thoughts towards those? Are you looking at those with real optimism and seeing which countries trade deals are being agreed with, and you're going to perhaps push for more sales in those particular countries?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously the ones Australia and they're brilliant. I will generate more sales for us organically. I feel like we've got the right partners in place, so I feel that's a big tick. It gives them an extra bit of energy to get going. But I think certain markets, so obviously the agreement now with like Chile and Mexico and places like that, we do a hell of a lot of work in Chile, and we should be doing a lot more work in Mexico. So Mexico is one in the top 5 pig producers in the world. We build animal byproduct incinerators. We hardly sell any there. The feedback was always about the tax and duties when it got into the country, where now, by the time that the agreement becomes live, which I believe it's July, I may be wrong, then that encourages us to jump on the plane and actually get in front of our distributors and actually understand with the DBT what opportunities we have. Are they the right partners for us? And then put an action plan in to say, how are we now going to make our products seen in Mexico, whether it's going to an exhibition or it's going into some agricultural trade magazines or whatever it is, it's putting a bit of energy into that type of market. The other areas, so we're seeing a big growth in the US. So it's really looking at some markets there where there is trade agreements, but not on the whole US. So there's agreements with certain states within the US where it then makes you look of saying, well, actually, is this an opportunity for us to set up a distribution there? We export our goods to that place, and then that becomes a distribution hub for our machines. Or even if it's the fact of sending the machines out, like 75% complete and 25% is done in country. So we're still generating jobs in the US, but it's looking at those opportunities and saying, how can we make this grow? So this year alone, we should say 50% of our turnover is probably going to be the US. So we have to look at it.
That's 2 really interesting points just at the end there about different ways around sort of getting into the USA market. I think a reasonably common pain point that you will have had that it'd be interesting to get your insight on is around sort of incinerators by their nature are quite difficult to manage logistically. You've kind of alluded to that, you know, much earlier. What is your advice for other businesses that have that concern? They perhaps have a big product that they're very proud of, but they're just thinking, oh, it's just going to be a nightmare to move. How do you get around that particular hurdle so effectively?
So within AES, it's more production line. They'll build, say, 250 incinerators and cremators a year. Where Addfield projects, it's really looking at the customer's problem, and then every machine will be slightly different. But we would look at looking on a design order. So that design order then makes us look at what is the waste type, who is the client, how are we going to get the waste into the machine, how are they going to operate, how are they going to maintain it. If we can build it and it fits legislation, brilliant. Okay, how do we get it there? So there's 2 thought processes that go into it then is, 1, can it get on a boat? 2, can the country that's taking the goods on board accept the weight? Have they got those right cranes on site? So we had a project that was in the Ascension Island, which obviously is a very remote island. There was about 800 population, but they only had capacity for, I think it was 20-ton or 40-ton cranes. So there was a real limit of what we could put in each container. So it meant that we needed to do more site work with assembly than what we would normally do on another job. Because we knew that, and it was brought up in our design, it was brought up as risks, it allowed us then to say, okay, yeah, it is going to be more of a headache, but headaches are opportunities. If you have an inquiry that comes in on the morning, you'll probably find that 5 of your competitors have had the same inquiry. So why are they going to choose you above everyone else? A lot of people employ salespeople, but if you become the sales expert and actually understand the barriers and you give them a solution, they won't look anywhere else. So the scenarios where we will actually build certain things in country and we will project manage it, because that's the only way that we can get it there. But if no one else is going to do it, yes, it does give headaches. We've got a large waste to energy system that's in the factory at the moment that's going to be burning clinical waste, and it's going to generate its own electrical power. It's going to generate superheated steam to clean the bins, and superheated steam is going to steam engines to generate electrical power. It's going to be off the grid, so it doesn't need to rely on a grid connection. It can be self-reliant. But to get that made on time and making sure that it's not going to flood my factory and sit there for 3 months because a component isn't going to be ready on time, there is a lot of planning that needs to go in there. So it's understanding within your team, you may need a different skill set. So that's why we split the businesses. So the one's very project-minded with project managers, where AES is very much building the same product all the time.
Yeah, it's been really interesting hearing you. It's kind of the sort of, if you pardon the logistics pun, but the sort of outside the box solutions that you've come up with to get round problems and find solutions for end buyers. It's been really great to chat with you, Derek. Thanks for your time. Just my final question. Final question, just a bit of a cheery one, I suppose. I have had this from a lot of people that I've spoken to that have been doing a lot of exporting. It sounds like it's just, above all else, really good fun and really enjoyable to do. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I don't tell my wife it's that fun when I'm jumping on the plane, and obviously I'm going there for work, and then on the evening I'm having a few drinks with people who I now call friends. It is fun. It is hard. It is tiring. Definitely at the beginning, you feel like every day is a fight, but you believe in your products. You believe on where you're going to bring added value. But if you don't enjoy it, you're never going to enjoy it. I feel like being able to be on that plane and being able to say, I'm going to smash this. I'm going to go there. I'm going to come away with a sale. I'm going to come away with a distributor, and having that positive energy before you jump on that plane. As I said, it's with the managers and leaders. If it's a fact that you show that you've got a great product, people will follow you. There's that old saying, isn't it? If you build it, they will come. And I think that's something to take away. Of like, have fun, believe in your product, have a strong USP, and shout about it. Let the world know.
Great advice. This has been really interesting, Derek. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you today. Thanks very much for joining me on the podcast.
No worries, Scott. Thank you for inviting me.
Really appreciated Derek taking the time to speak to me on the WTA Group podcast. And I thought it would be worth rounding up his key takeaways for businesses before we wrap up the podcast today. Firstly, he said that if you've not begun your exporting journey, consider internationalizing your business before you do. Steps like giving it a global phone number and a .com website address, a nice website with up-to-date relevant content can all give your business an international appeal. The second key point for new exporters centered around selling a solution to a problem, not just a product, to really ensure you strike a chord with international buyers. For more established exporters, Derek suggested thinking outside the box to solve recruitment issues. Look at sponsorships, although he admitted that does cost, but could have profoundly positive impacts on your operational capacity. Asking for government support is another solution to the recruitment issue. For finding distributors, Derek said don't be afraid to go to trade shows around the world, but crucially, research the attendees beforehand and set up meetings. He also made the point that you need to make sure your business's digital shop window is up to scratch. Your website and social media pages should be full of content positioning you as industry experts and show off a positive culture with these things in place, distributors you have spoken to will feel confident in your credibility. And finally, he said, think creatively when problem solving. A headache is an opportunity, I believe, was Derek's mantra, using the example of the US market, where the UK only has unofficial trade deals with a handful of states, and protectionist policy is widespread. Therefore, Addfield's best route into the US market has been targeting those states and assembling 25% of the machine in the country. Derek said that I think half their turnover now comes from the US market. Lots of great advice then for businesses at all stages of their exporting journey. Thanks again to Derek for joining me, and I'll see you next time.